Ryan Neiman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630. WMAL.
It is 6:37 on the Morning Majority. Wilson, Neiman, and Ham all in the house. And, much talk being generated in this town about the Gang of Six and a deal that they are proposing to find our way out of this debt ceiling morass that we find ourselves in. And a lot of people are sort of saying, well, this might be the one. I mean, Speaker Boehner didn't come out and endorse the plan, but he said, it makes sense to look for a plan B. Eric Kenner, House Majority Leader, says this bipartisan plan seems to include some constructive ideas to deal with our debt, didn't knock it down. The president sort of was lukewarm in saying this might be a place where we could move. He seemed encouraged. So we all wonder, what would the Americans for Tax Reform, what would Grover Norquist say? And in his statement yesterday, I sort of will characterize this as a keep your powder dry kind of statement. Didn't endorse it, didn't knock it down. So let's find out what Grover thinks about the Gang of Six plan. He's on the phone now. Grover, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, what do you think, Grover? Have you had time to absorb what we know, which is, actually not a lot about the plan? What do you think?
Well, that's exactly the problem. Remember, the Gang of Six was set up to put into legislative form, into legislative language, so you could know exactly what it was, the Obama Debt Commission's report, which came out last December. So for 6 months, the Gang of Six has said that what they were going to do is put in writing something that would take 2 weeks, but it's taken 6 months. And one wonders why they can't put in English, in legislative form, the outline form, the essay form that was this debt commission.
Can I ask you a question, though? Tom Coburn walked away. Senator Tom Coburn walked away a while ago and said he didn't think it was going in the right direction, and now he's back on board. What do you read into that?
Well, the challenge is we're not sure what to read into it because the plan that they have is in essay form. It talks about reducing marginal tax rates and give you a range between 23 and 29. It kicks a lot of these decisions to a Senate Finance Committee where all the majority of that committee were picked by Harry Reid. So if one was to say, this is a great plan, it isn't written yet. And it's very unclear how much of it's taxes and how much of it's spending. So I really wish that they'd spent the last 6 months writing it down rather than coming up with another essay form. The reason we didn't attack it was as you read the essay and the little outlines of what
bullet points,
there's some pieces that might make sense. But Mr. Durbin, the very left-of-center senator from Illinois, was a major part in writing this. So I would really like to see them write it down before they run around and ask people to support it. I fear that this is one of those things where they come up with an idea, and you can fall in love with the idea and miss that the specifics may be something very, very different.
Grover, any idea what made Tom Coburn jump back into the Gang of Six? 2 days ago, he was on his $9 trillion bill, and then he's back into this all of a sudden.
It's an interesting question. He had given several reasons for when he walked away. One was that the Democrats weren't willing to do any serious spending restraint. Another was that the Democrats were insisting on $2 trillion in tax increases, and that was too much even for Senator Coburn, who pretty much alone among Republicans has been willing to talk about raising taxes on the American people rather than focusing completely on the overspending problem. This new plan may be a tax increase, may not be completely. I've had it explained to me by one of the Gang of Six that makes it sound optimistic, but I think people should really ask them, would you please spend less time on TV telling everybody about what your hopes and aspirations are for the plan, and spend the afternoon writing it down so that we can make a judgment on it.
But Grover, if you give a facts, then you'll have stuff to attack it with, and that's what they know.
We're getting close to the August 2nd deadline. It may not be August 2nd, but it's sometime in August, okay? And we really ought to have the people who are supposed to bring their homework to class should have done their homework ahead of time. If you wanted to introduce a new idea, it might have paid to treat the rest of us with enough respect to have written it down before you showed up. Again, it's possible this could turn into a useful piece of the puzzle, My concern is it does appear to include unspecific large tax increases, and that's a non-starter.
But it could be the framework for more negotiations. But as you said, it's not in legislative language right now, and you want to look at it closely. I'm sure members of Congress want to look at it closely. I think they should. So there's no way that this can actually get done and pass before August 2nd.
Unlikely. It also does two things. It tries to do tax reform, and it works on doing spending restraint. The Republicans in the House and the Senate have said, look, let's take tax reform and put it off to the side for two reasons. It's complicated, it's a long project, and we think if Obama, Reid, and Pelosi get involved in tax reform, they will turn it into a tax increase. That however it starts out, it'll turn into a tax increase. So set it aside, and let's focus on the spending restraint. The Gang of Six outline of a proposal includes both changes in the tax code and spending restraint, and one fears that the more you look at it, it's more tax increase and less spending cut than originally advertised.
Right.
But again, we'll have to see.
Yeah.
I just think it is wise. Set them aside. Let's take a look at the spending cuts that the Gang of Six has. Let's do those.
Okay, the spending cuts, the way what I read it this morning said that there was $500 billion of real cuts. Whoever you talked with in the Gang of Six, and it'd be great if you could tell us who that was, if you can. Is that real? Is it really $500 billion of cuts, of real money being cut from the budget?
One hopes so. The challenge is that we haven't been told sort of over what period of time. Any promise to cut domestic discretionary spending outside of the next year and a half window is a promise that isn't enforceable. This is what happened to Reagan in 82 and to Bush in 90. We've played Lucy in the football before on that. That's why the Republicans had argued earlier for changes in entitlement programs, and that you can count how much would be saved by taxpayers over the next 75 years if you know that you've changed the rules. If you just promise to spend less, it's different. There's also a somewhat convoluted Senate rule where you'd set caps for each department, and to go above the cap would take a two-thirds vote. Mm-hmm. Some of that, again, whenever I hear or try to discuss Senate rules, my head hurts.
But that sounds good to me, though, that they would have to have a majority vote in order to raise caps.
Two-thirds majority. Supermajority.
Supermajority.
And if that's enforceable, and I would defer to some of the senators who really follow this stuff, then that might actually be a piece of the solution. Yeah.
Grover, very quickly as our time runs down, I need to ask you, if we can't get there by August 2nd, would you be okay with a short-term increase in the debt limit so there's not a default if this really looks like it has some merit?
Oh, sure. In return for some, look, there are a whole series of spending restraint that Obama and the Republicans have agreed to, but nobody wants to do the easy stuff until they do the tough stuff. Let's take several $100 billion that they can agree to.
Do it quickly.
Do that now, and then move and agree to a short time, small debt ceiling increase to get you several months more. There's no reason to do this in a panic. Yeah. Salesmen trying to sell you aluminum siding who want you to decide in the next 20 minutes are trying to cheat you.
Yep.
Politicians who tell you, when the Soviets would say, we have to decide this weekend on the missile treaty, you just know you're being cheated.
Right.
So let's take our time.
All right, Grover, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Grover NORQUIST, President of Americans for Tax Reform, with the